Bharati Institute of Public Policy at the Indian School of Business. It's a true privilege for us to have all of you here for the launch of the public policy book series titled as The Innovation, Practice and Future of Public Policy, which is being launched by the Indian School of Business in collaboration with Routledge. It's also, I'll just hold on. It's also a privilege to be launching the first book in this public policy book series, the book titled The Last Mile by Mr. Amarjeet Sinha. A huge round of applause to Mr. Sinha. It's a privilege to have experts on various dimensions on human development here with us today, who will be speaking on the very imperative aspects around human development, and we welcome all of them here. Before I go ahead, I would request Professor Ashwini Chhatre, the Executive Director of the Bharati Institute of Public Policy at the Indian School of Business, to welcome all our guests and eminent speakers. Professor Chhatre.
Thank you very much, and please accept my obligatory welcome. Since all of you are already here, we look forward to hearing not just about the book, but also reflections on what the book talks about as it relates to our own experiences, an esteemed panel of speakers. And as part of this welcome, I also expect a beginning, and this is represented by the first book in the book series, Innovations, Practice and Future of Public Policy in India. It is always both useful and scary to have such a high quality publication to get started. This is a very high bar to meet, and in the spirit of the occasion, we are only too happy to raise ourselves and rise to the challenge. In the spirit of turning public policy upside down by documenting and then translating voices from below, from the bottom of the pyramid, from the communities, from the women who are at the forefront of many of these livelihood battles, the voices that are encapsulated in this book are for you to discover. The book is available as open access in PDF form for everyone on our website as well as on the website of Routledge Publishers. For those of you who value, like me, having a hefty book in hand to read, it is also available for a hefty price tag, as usual. And I conclude this welcome with an invitation to engage the content of this book in terms of turning public policy upside down by listening to the voices on which we purport to base our public policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chhatre. As we are here together for a book launch, we also have with us a very famous pianist, Mr. Siddharth Mukherjee, and I'm going to request him to just play a very beautiful composition, Ekla Chalo Re. Individuals can make a difference by treading all alone, and we're going to begin this entire event with a small music note.
যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে, তবে একলা চলো রে, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে, তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো না চলো একলা চলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি কেউ কথা না কয় ওরে ওরে ও অভাগা কেউ কথা না কয় যদি কেউ কথা না কয় ওরে ওরে ও অভাগা কেউ কথা না কয় যদি সবাই থাকে মুখ ফিরায় সবাই করে ভয় যদি সবাই থাকে মুখ ফিরায় সবাই করে ভয় তবে পরাণ খুলে ও তুই মুখ ফুটে তোর মনের কথা একলা বলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে
Thank you so much. And this is the time when we launch the book, The Last Mile Turning Public Policy Upside Down. I request our publishers to please come on the stage for the launch. Please come. West. Would like to say something. So we have our publishers from the Routledge as well as हमारी हिंदी वर्जन के जो हमारे publishers हैं, प्रभात प्रकाशन, here on the stage with us. Thanks a lot to the publishers. I would now request Mr. Amarjeet Sinha to kindly come on the stage and introduce the concept of the last mile and also the idea behind the discussion today. Mr. Sinha, please.
Respected seniors, colleagues, foot soldiers in our work on lives and livelihoods for the last 40 years, you must be wondering, there's one author of a book, why did he need 12 such distinguished people here? I only want to confess, all I have done is recorded some of the outstanding work that each one of them have been doing in their respective areas. You've seen the cover. The cover is a collective of women. We have with us such distinguished professionals. You will get to interact with them when they speak and what they have done. We have Sister Sujita with us. We were just in the middle of our career trying to learn something on education with the Bihar Education Project. Sister for 10 years had been living in a Musahar Basti in Danapur trying to help out Musahar families. When we started the Bihar Education Project, we requested her to come and set up the Mahila Samakhya for us. And what happened thereafter, including the Jivika movement in Bihar, is a tribute to her mentoring of the first generation of Mahila Samakhya leaders who subsequently became the champions all over. This book is about them. We have with us Kirti from Bundelkhand. कीर्ति जी 2018 तक महिलाएं संगठित हो गई थी बुंदेलखंड के 7 जिलों में, झांसी में, ललितपुर में, बांदा में, लेकिन आर्थिक गतिविधियां फिर भी पीछे थी थोड़ी। दीनदयाल अंत्योदय योजना, राष्ट्रीय ग्रामीण आजीविका मिशन, जिससे जुड़ने का मौका लगा मुझे भी, और जहाँ पे आज करीब 9 करोड़ महिलाएं देश में काम करती हैं साथ में मिल करके। बिहार के मधेपुरा और सुपौल में, मध्य प्रदेश के 2 जिलों में और बुंदेलखंड में हम लोगों ने तय किया कि जब सामाजिक ऊर्जा इतनी है, सोशल कैपिटल इतना है, महिलाओं का संगठन है, हम क्यों ना यहाँ पर कोई ऐसे इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी, आर्थिक गतिविधियों को प्रारंभ करें जिससे महिलाएं स्वावलंबी हो सकें और आगे बढ़ सकें। इस क्रम में कई लोगों का मार्गदर्शन मिला। जुगल महापात्रा साहब का मार्गदर्शन किया। हम लोग कैपिटल सब्सिडी देते देते थक गए हैं। कैपिटल सब्सिडी से कुछ नहीं होता है। इस बार ट्राई करते हैं हम लोग, व्हाई डोंट वी हैव सपोर्ट फॉर HR फॉर विमेंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस। NDDB सर्विसेज को टेक्निकल पार्टनर बना के आजीविका मिशन से हम लोगों ने तय किया कि 3 से 5 साल तक का सैलरी जो मैनेजर और टेक्नोलॉजिस्ट और बाकी लोग होंगे वो सरकार वहन करेगी, लेकिन 5 साल के बाद उस प्रोड्यूसर कंपनी को इतना कमाना पड़ेगा कि सैलरी भी उसी से निकल जाए, सरकार की ज़रूरत ना पड़े। आज इन 5 जगहों पे सरकार की अब ज़रूरत नहीं है। द विमेन, और जिस बलिनी मिल्क प्रोड्यूसर कंपनी से आप आई हैं, 66,000 महिलाएं 7 जिलों की हैं, और आप जानना चाहेंगे कि 18 से अब तक इन्होंने कितना कमाया है। 66,000 महिलाएं अब तक 588 करोड़ कमा चुकी हैं। इनमें कई भूमिहीन परिवार है और कई मार्जिनल स्मॉल फार्मर्स हैं। दिस इज द पावर ऑफ प्रोफेशनल्स इन रूरल एरियाज विथ एक्सेस टू क्रेडिट फॉर द पुअर। आई डोंट थिंक वी हैव ट्रस्टेड them enough with it. We have the distinguished Dr. Ashok Lahiri. We know him in many roles and avatars, from being a chief economic advisor in the ADB, somebody with the Finance Commission for a long time. He wears a new hat at the moment. He's a member of a legislative assembly in West Bengal. But his heart is on decentralization and how to make it effective. We are aware about the contributions which he has made there. The 16th, all the finance commissions in the last few years, and the focus on decentralization. This book believes that decentralization is the way forward on human development, and therefore we needed his guidance. Jugal Mahapatra sir, besides being a mentor to me for many, many years, is somebody who analyzes in seconds and tells you what is the right approach to take. Whenever we are designing programs, we look up to him. We celebrate the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana for the rural roads. He's the person who gave it a design which insulates it against many other construction projects, which ensures certain quality and standards. How the pursuit of excellence in infrastructure projects can be pursued relentlessly is what we learned from him, and therefore this book is about better public management as well, and we needed to hear what he would like to guide us for. In the corner there we have 2 very distinguished persons who have worked in education. Vrinda Saroop, who has been Education Secretary, Secretary Education in Uttar Pradesh, and Vineet Nair, who wore a different hat earlier. He was the chief executive officer of HCL. After they had done very well in HCL, they chose to come out from there. He and his wife, Anupma, who is a special educator, they set up a foundation called Sampark Foundation, whose objective is that through frugal innovations to improve learning outcomes in government schools. I have had the privilege of knowing the work that they are doing and the kind of transformation it is bringing in Haryana, Chhattisgarh, Uttar Pradesh, and many other states. They work with more than 1 crore children. For each of the states that they are working in, they have audio material, they have audio-visual material, they have non-threatening assessment systems. If you have a television set in the classroom, even an average teacher can ensure a certain basic level of learning outcome. That is the kind of frugal innovation, using technology, but taking it to scale. We wanted to know what are the opportunities. This book does talk about it, on how technology is a means to an end and not an end in itself in the context of certain works, because there are people who believe that technology will do it all. By itself, unfortunately, it is not as powerful a tool as it becomes when you have somebody who actually facilitates that. We have with us Saroj Mahapatra, CEO of Pradhan. Sarojji needs no introduction. These were young, bright graduates, MBAs from the best of institutions, who set up Pradhan and decided thereafter that professionals will transform rural areas. On sustainable agriculture, on women's collectives, on economic activity through women's collectives. He has demonstrated in Chhattisgarh, in Odisha, in Jharkhand, in many states, the possibilities that women-led development and women collectives could do. He will talk more about it when he comes on stage. We have Sanchita Mitra, the CEO of Seva Bharat. हम कहते हैं कि महिलाओं तक क्रेडिट कैसे पहुंचाएं. संचिता जी का काम है अनऑर्गेनाइज्ड वुमेन तक क्रेडिट पहुंचाने का, और सेवा भारत, इला भट्ट के मार्गदर्शन में इन लोगों ने जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस बनाए, आज बहुत लार्ज स्केल पर गरीब महिलाओं के नई इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज़ को आगे बढ़ा रहे हैं. These are the people whose stories and from whom one learnt. Therefore, I had no business of occupying the stage alone. These are the people from whom we learn and continuously learn to improve lives and livelihoods of people around us. We have Dr. K. Srinath Reddy with us. He needs no introduction. The cardiologist in AIIMS who often told his patients, you don't need a surgery. And the public health specialist who outshines many public health experts. Somebody who set up the Public Health Foundation of India and built it up. During COVID, we all looked to his interviews and to his articles to understand where we are headed. Dr. Reddy has mentored a generation of youngsters wanting to work in public health and cardiology, and continues to do so in the various hats that he wears. So, public health was one of the themes that this book has chosen, and needed to understand from him how do we proceed on that. We have the distinguished Dr. Ritu Priye, with whom I had the occasion to work in the health mission. Ritu ji was the head of the department in community medicine in JNU. She was a part of the NRHM National Health System Resource Center for some years. But more importantly, somebody who understands the community connect and the non-medicalized perspective, the wider determinants of health, on how they make a difference to the lives of people. Since this book talked about it, it was important to get her perspective on what works and what doesn't work. Ashwini Chhatre needs no introduction. Ashwini heads the Bharati Institute of Public Policy, and climate action is his passion. But the Indian School of Business has also taken up the challenge of working with tribal collectives in very remote areas, some of the poorer communities in Orissa, in Jharkhand, and in Himachal Pradesh, to demonstrate how economic activities of scale is possible using some of the community connect which they are trying to establish. Friends, this book, both in English and Hindi, because I realized that very often many of the people, distinguished people here who do a lot of work but don't write about it. So I am in some ways a scribe for all of them, trying to put together many of the ideas that I have learned from them, because they needed to be demonstrated on scale. The first conviction that the book begins with is that if we want to be a developed India, yes, we must pursue economic progress and the ease of doing business by all means, but we also need to improve our human development rank, because minus appropriate human capital, appropriate movement up the skilling ladder, there are limits to the rates of growth that we'll finally attain. Friends, the basic learning comes for very simple graphs. I'll mention two of them because they are relevant for the work that we'll be doing subsequently also. One, if you look at Japan, South Korea, China, and India, and just look at one variable, when did those countries attain universal primary education for girls? Just one variable. Japan did it at the turn of the 20th century. South Korea did it in the 1960s. China did it in the 1980s. And we've done it at the turn of the 21st century. And look at the economic progress that these nations have made. Therefore, women's education is not unconnected or unrelated with the rates of economic progress that countries are able to finally manage. The other example in our own country, all of us sitting in this room, we will make this statement that southern Indian states, there is much less poverty than rest of India. And yes, the data says so. The multidimensional poverty data, Kerala reporting 0.55% persons who are multidimensionally poor. Tamil Nadu reporting 2.2%. When the national average is about 15%, they are at 0.55 and 2.2. How did this come about? One of the hypotheses that this book explores in some detail, 6 factors which seem to have made a difference. Foremost was the adolescent girls in schools and colleges. When adolescent girls go to high schools and higher education, fertility rates come tumbling down. The correlation is direct. Third, when women cycle to schools, high schools and colleges or use public transport, for the first time it creates an identity which is distinct from all the identities she has lived with. Nobody's daughter, nobody's sister, nobody's wife, but a woman unto her own. And that's how women's self-help groups got constituted in the southern Indian states much earlier than the rest of the country. The fourth factor, since she is educated up to higher education and high school, opportunities for vocationalization are there, becoming a nurse, becoming an IT assistant, becoming a lab technician, and so on. And in Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka in particular, many opportunities were available for it. The fifth factor, the women will feel confident to go to work or to go to a skill center only if the family's health is okay, the child is all right. All my male friends here, kindly recall even once if you've taken leave when children have fallen ill. Has it not been your wife who did that? Now, unless and until you have better maternal and child health and primary care, how do you expect them to go and do work and also go to training institutions? So these states also focused on primary health. The sixth factor, 30 years ago, Dr. C. Rangarajan, as the governor of RBI, brought in a very interesting change that up to rupees 10 lakhs, women's self-help groups could get collateral-free loans. And these 6 factors transformed a lot of what happens. Friends, I leave you to read the book, but the third hypothesis I have, wherever elected local governments work with community organizations which are vibrant, like the women self-help groups, the Kudumsri in Kerala, we find the services rendered by such local governments are far superior than in many other parts of the country. Clearly, decentralization with elected local government leaders, along with the countervailing presence of strong, resilient community organizations, improves accountability of public systems. And of course, the last point, which is, if you're working in education, health, livelihood, nutrition, skills, you cannot afford to work through narrow departmentalism. You will necessarily need a horizontal platform close to the community, because what happens in undernutrition has consequences for the learning outcomes of children. If a child is undernourished, he or she would never have the opportunity to secure the learning outcomes that many other children have. Friends, these are some very commonsensical points for which I tried to hunt for evidence. The positive good news is that what happened in the southern Indian states has happened now on a large scale in the rest of the country. I feel proud when people tell me that the women of Bihar, the Jivika movement in Bihar, women from Bihar go to Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh and other states to form community organizations there. Bihar, Assam, Odisha, the Mission Shakti in Odisha, West Bengal, every state, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, are now moving towards a saturation of women self-help groups and a much higher order of credit from banks over the last 10 to 12 years. More importantly, if you look at the data for 2010 to 2015, what happened in the southern Indian states much earlier, adolescent girls have joined and voted with their feet for secondary and higher secondary school. In my own home state of Bihar, if I look at data 20 years ago, 2003, 2004, for every 36 girls, there were 64 boys taking the metric exam, the secondary exam. Today, it is 49-51. Quality of outcomes has not happened, but adolescent girls have voted with their feet for secondary and higher secondary education. That's a good sign. That is what transformed southern Indian states. And if we focus similarly in many of our other states, surely decline in multidimensional poverty will be much faster in the rest of the country. Friends, I leave you to read the book. These are some ideas. I could not prevent from making a mention of it. And very rightly, Arushi points out the person who I have known for the longest time, I have forgotten him, Dr. Mahesh Sharma. Mahesh ji and I go back to 1982. There were these 4 M.Tech graduates from IIT Delhi who came to a village in Jharkhand, the then Bihar, in Bishunpur block. Vikas Bharati is what the name of the organization was. And they were trying to establish that it is possible for tribal communities to get into economic activity, to secure better education, to get into skills and do a lot of other things. Subsequently, Dr. Mahesh Sharma served as a chairperson of the Khadi Village and Industries Corporation for 2 terms when Honorable Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was the Prime Minister of the country, and contributed very significantly in scaling up a lot of the processes in KVIC. Today, he continues to do work in rural areas in Haridwar, Rishikesh area, at Saharanpur belt at the moment. But more importantly, he is also the Chancellor of the Mahatma Gandhi University in Bihar, which has been set up in Champaran, the Central University. And among other things, he started a course, a master's in sustainable development recently, based on all the learning that he carries of 40 years of living with tribal communities in a very, very difficult area in Bihar, current Jharkhand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha. I think another round of applause for him. For bringing out this book, Aakhri Meal, that is going to help policymakers, but also going to inspire a lot of women who are working at the grassroots. The stories probably that have been explained, the way he has shared the experiences of a lot of these people that work at the grassroots is something that will inspire the population at large and also help policymakers, both in terms of policy design as well as policy implementation. So heartiest congratulations on the launch of this book. As we go ahead, we have a beautiful song at this stage by Mr. Siddharth Mukherjee.
रुक जाना नहीं तू कहीं हार के, कांटों पे चल के मिलेंगे साए बाहर के। रुक जाना नहीं तू कहीं हार के, कांटों पे चल के मिलेंगे साए बाहर के। हो राही 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 हो राही, साथी न कारवा है ये तेरा इम्तिहान है, साथी न कारवा है ये तेरा इम्तिहान है। साथी 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 न कारवा है ये तेरा इम्तिहान है। यूं ही चला चल दिल के सहारे, करती है मंजिल तुमको इशारे। देख कहीं कोई रोक नहीं ले तुझको पुकार के। हो राही हो राही हो राही हो राही, रुक जाना नहीं तू कहीं हार के, कांटों पे चल के मिलेंगे साए बाहर के। रुक जाना नहीं तू कहीं हार के, कांटों पे चल के मिलेंगे साए बाहर के।
Ashok Lahiri, the economist, the former chief economic advisor of India. He was the former executive director of ADB. To please come here and talk about decentralized community action for human development outcomes. Dr. Lahiri, ladies and gentlemen.
And colleague Amarjit Sinha, the author of the famous book, I'm sure it will become a famous book, Decentralized Community Action for Human Development Outcomes, distinguished panelists and friends. I'm happy to be here for the release of Amarjit's book. The book contains a comprehensive description of the development schemes that are being implemented in the country and explores the gaps between drafted policies and the outcomes. That's the important thing. What did we want to achieve and what did we achieve? And the problems are in the implementation. It comes from a recently retired senior civil servant who, for much of his career, and I know him for quite some time, pursued people-centric development, particularly rural development, with passion and missionary zeal. A strong point of the book is that you can read any chapter. I haven't gone through all the chapters, but I've gone through about 10. And it's not necessary to read them in sequence. You can read any chapter, which is a great quality. I recommend the book to you all. I shall keep my observations brief because, like most of you, such luminaries sitting on the panel, I'm also looking forward to hearing them, so I'll keep my observations very brief. What I'll say is partly from what I have read and partly from the experience that I have gained in the last 2.5 years. As some of you may know, in May 2021, the people of Balurghat elected me to the West Bengal Legislative Assembly. Balurghat constituency is in the district of Dakshin Dinajpur, which is really a remote area because it's surrounded on three sides by Bangladesh. It has plenty of challenges, including many poor households for the households practically everywhere, semi-rural. For the past 2.5 years, I've had the benefit of working and living on the last mile, which is what is your book about. I love the title of Amarjit's book, The Last Mile. If policies do not deliver in the last mile, it is like cooking a great meal, but burning it, or not putting any salt or putting too much salt, you've spoiled the dish. So you may design a great policy, but it doesn't get implemented properly, it doesn't deliver the results. What's the point? Amarjit emphasizes 4 things. Community connect. Second, an evidence-based approach. 3, application of technology. And 4, a deeper understanding of the last mile challenges in the making of public policies. I'll focus on the challenges of understanding the challenges of the last mile and designing policies. No point in saying it's a great policy but couldn't be implemented. If it can't be implemented, why design such a policy? It's useless. I believe in a developing country, the toughest of all of them is the community connect. I'm very impressed by a statement that John Kenneth Galbraith, the 6 feet 7 inch tall US ambassador, Harvard economist, who was ambassador to India during 1961-63, he said, I quote, "There is no place in the world where a well-educated population is really poor." I often imagine what would happen if we were to replace the poor illiterate people in one of the villages anywhere in India, including in my constituency, by a bunch of educated young men and women, including some from IITs, IIMs, medical colleges, agricultural universities. See, the problem is people may be backward not in a derogatory sense, but backward in the sense you haven't educated me, so I'm backward. You haven't given me the vaccines and you haven't given me the proper food, that's why I'm backward. A place may be underdeveloped and the people may be backward. If the people are backward, the place is likely to be underdeveloped. So if you did that, replace the people in one of my villages or in one of the villages of Bastar by such a bunch of young men and women from IITs, IIMs, agricultural universities, medical colleges, I can bet you go back after 2 years, you'll find the place is completely revolutionized. And even just transplanting a few such educated young people in the village would work like magic. Why? I think because of the improved community connect. Forget my hypothetical experiment. Think of the effectiveness of policies and programs in some of our southern states. What works with reasonable effectiveness in Tamil Nadu or Kerala fail to deliver similar results in many others because of the differences in community connect. The seriousness with which village development plans are drawn up, the accounts of the local bodies are examined, or the leakages in the implementation of public projects detected, tend to be critically dependent on how connected the community is with the development projects, and that in turn on how advanced the people are in terms of education, health, and income. Given the way that we are, I should not create the impression that decentralization to the local bodies was ahead of its times. Learning to function with democratic institutions takes time, and in a large country with large states, decentralization is the only way to good governance. And I tell you this, I'm very proud of my founding fathers, because in front of your eyes, all of you are middle-aged, if not senior citizen like me, we have seen in front of our eyes the Soviet Union disintegrating, Pakistan disintegrating, Yugoslavia disintegrating, Czechoslovakia disintegrating, India. Despite our ethnic, linguistic diversity, we have held on, and we have done a reasonable job. I mean, we won't get the Nobel Prize for development, but we have done fairly well. Now, in a large country with large state, decentralization is the only way. I strongly believe that there is no way but to decentralize. There is a symbiotic relationship between governance and people's democratic behavior. As governance improves, peoples become better educated, with better health and higher income. They demand better policies. If not for anything else, then for winning elections, politicians like me will formulate policies to win elections. So policies reflect. In fact, Barack Obama went to Milan and the Italians were complaining. He said, don't complain. The politicians are those people whom you elected. So what the politicians reflect is the people. So this is the symbiotic relationship. So when there is development, people improve. When people improve, they demand better policies. When they give better policies, the development of the people accelerates, and so on. It continues. And I have seen that. This is not the time to go into detailed discussions, but we have seen that in both at the union level and the state level. The constitutional devolution to the third tier in 1993 was the right thing to do. I believe that. That in turn actually means what we need is not less decentralization, more decentralization in terms of funds, functionaries, and funds. Funds, functions, and functionaries. I don't know which one I missed the first time. As Amarjit observes in his book, decentralization within the framework of the 11th schedule and the 29 sectors and 12th schedule and the 18 sectors in urban local bodies with adequate thrust on human resource management to address efficiency and effectiveness of challenges in decentralized governance actually holds the key to a transformation of lives and livelihoods, unquote. I cannot help but comment on one feature of the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, which I think Amarjit also mentioned in his speech. Believe it or not, the clear policy decision was that not 1 rupee would be paid for land acquisition. He mentions, I didn't know that. In your book, I learned this. Not a single rupee would be paid for land acquisition. The rural guys, they want a road. But it's stuck. I have seen that in some villages. It's stuck because you are not willing to give your little piece of land through which the road will travel. No road then. If some private land came in the alignment of the village connectivity, the person would have to willingly transfer the land for the road. And in most places, they did. You have to be strong. You have to say, you don't want to give that piece of land? At least give us the land, we'll build the road. Such is the power of Community Connect. Now allow me just 2 short comments to comment in brief on the design of policies in Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme and primary education. As Amarjit notes in his book, Manrega or Manregs was not supposed to be a pension scheme, but a scheme for livelihood security. You give a pension to me, it doesn't make me secure in the future. I'll again ask you for the same pension next month, next year, every year. On the ground, however, the reality in terms of creation of durable assets that can enhance livelihood security is not that pretty. I suggest considering widespread use of the following features. I won't elaborate on them, but I think Amarjit sort of hints at them but doesn't develop them fully. First, increasing use of individual beneficiaries. So, a village pond need not be a village pond. It can be my pond also, because then I have an incentive to make sure that those guys are actually doing a good job in the pond. So first do my pond, then you do your pond. Whose pond you decide is a different matter. Second, so this is for better monitoring and better implementation. Second, management of the projects on a piece rate basis. Now this is a revolutionary thing, but this I am talking from an article that I read by Ladijinski in the early 1970s. He came to Maharashtra, and Maharashtra had a series of 3 consecutive droughts. It was a terrible situation. And there he mentions that it's in the piece rate. And one of the things, some young district magistrate, he said, why are you make people, what was it called? It was called metal breaking, stone breaking. I mean, why are you making them do this? He said, because of self-selection. If you don't make them break stones or do some work, then everyone, even I, will go and line up that give me 213 rupees per day. But piece rate will ensure that work gets done. I mean, there is implementation problems. My suggestion is not for you accept it immediately. This should be discussed. The third, extending the application of 60 to 40 wages to material ratio. Right now it has gone from Gram Panchayat level to the district level. I am being brave enough to say, extend it to the state level. Let the state decide. Overall it has to be 60-40, but in some areas if it's 80-20, so be it. What is the problem? In primary education, as Amarjit discusses, India has done a reasonable good job in increasing enrollment. Now the challenge is to improve the quality of education. Pratham has done a lot of work. There are experts on education who will tell me that. Amarjit notes how independent India provincialized teacher cadres, and I quote, teacher cadres became highly politicized and schools became polling booths to take forward a nascent democracy on its cautious journey. From being accountable to school management, school teacher cadres became statewide bureaucracies, immune to any local accountability. Decline was bound to set in. The administrative machinery remained unprepared to take this load of a large teachers' cadre. Transfers and postings became an industry and aligned with politics of the day and region. All in all, number of schools went up, but quality became a serious challenge. Unquote. I met teachers in schools in my constituency who travel 45 kilometers every day one way to teach. I wonder, after traveling by public transport for 45 kilometers, how will he or she actually do a good job of teaching? Similarly, I've seen schools which doesn't have the science stream. I was shocked that what's the point of producing only graduates in Bengali, Hindi, Tamil, English? We need science, more and more science. But that is what has happened. So my suggestion is that, or I have put it rather mildly, that I wonder whether it's time to decentralize the management and administrative control of the school teachers to the Zila Parishads, not the Gram Panchayats, but Zila Parishads. I would love to hear your views. This is a problematic area, but this needs to be pursued. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lahiri, for your inputs on the book and the insights from your experience. I would now like to invite Mr. Jugal Kishore Mahapatra, former Chief Secretary, Orissa, and former Secretary, Rural Development, Government of India, to talk on public policy and governance for a developed India. Dr. Mahapatra, please.
Thank you. We have a large and distinguished panel, so we'll keep it very short, and a lot of what I was supposed to speak about, Dr. Lahiri has really summed it up more emphatically than I could ever do it. But let me also start that Amarjit starts with a very, very interesting proposition. A policy can't be good if the implementation is poor. I think that's a fundamental point that he has made. You can't call a policy good if the implementation is not happening, it's not producing the intended outcomes. Take, for example, the ban on single-use plastic. I think almost everywhere we have initiated these policies, and in very few places you will see the policy actually getting implemented. So when we say that policy is good and implementation is poor, perhaps what we mean is that when we design policies, we didn't even look at who will implement, how will it get implemented, do they have the resources, do they have the expertise, do they have the skill set. So that's a question that he has mentioned, and I think that's from that perspective, this is an extremely important contribution he has made. Conceptually, a policy implementation problem can arise, or a program implementation can be poor if the institution which is supposed to implement the program on the ground does not have the capacity. They may not have the human resources, or the people who are supposed to implement this program on the ground, the frontline workers, don't have the right skill sets, and even the incentives. So the incentives and disincentives could also be a problem in implementation of policies and programs. Now, we often make this mistake, particularly in centrally sponsored schemes, very large centrally sponsored schemes, which are designed by the federal government, and ultimately there are different layers of transmission of the policies, and ultimately very rickety apparatus on the ground like Gram Panchayats in most places, which are very under-resourced and under-provisioned. They are supposed to do it. And we think only financial constraint is the problem. Finances are the problem. Rest all, if you have a policy and program, it gets done automatically. It gets done effectively. So that's a mistake we have made in conceptualizing and designing many large programs, including some of the programs that has been discussed in the book. Also, there is an issue that we rarely learn from mistakes. We don't often learn from mistakes. We keep repeating the same mistakes in new programs, upscaling it, and often replicating it very differently. One of the things that Amarjit therefore has advocated is evidence-based policy. Look at what has worked and why has it worked. So if we don't look at evidence of success and why it has succeeded, we can't design good policies, and that's a point that he has made very, very emphatically in this book. Amarjit basically has covered a very large area. Almost everything that you can think of in the social sector he has covered. But there are some issues which are very common. The common elements of what kind of a program and policy will succeed. And let me enumerate a few of them. Some of them will be discussed gradually. In many of our programs in the social sector are targeted programs. They are not universal programs. Few are universal, but many of them are targeted. How do we select the right beneficiaries? Do we have fair and transparent process of selection? That's a problem that has dogged many of our programs, including very, very large, what we call flagship programs. And one area when he has said it has worked is that when we used the socioeconomic survey in identification of beneficiaries for the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana and possibly Ujjwala Yojana. So that's a step forward. Perhaps I'm not saying that it's completely foolproof. A lot of anomalies that we had found in the earlier regimes, I think got corrected. The problem is SECC, which was done in 2012-13, has become extremely dated. So we can't rely on it as an anchor for future programs. We need either a fresh survey and get a new social registry for that. The second is, Dr. Lahiri has already emphasized, empowering the Panchayati Raj institutions, because many of the social sector programs will require on-ground implementation, and the only agency that we have on ground which has legal mandate to implement many of these programs are the Panchayati Raj institutions, particularly when it comes to intersectoral coordination. And Amarjit has given the example of nutrition, which is a multi-sector intervention, and if you leave it to the departments and the agencies to work out the program, it will never work. And who will coordinate the program on the ground? It is only the Panchayati Raj institutions who can discharge this program, and therefore strengthening of Panchayati Raj institutions have been extremely, they are very, very important. Although when Amarjit was the secretary, he constituted a committee gave recommendations. Most states possibly have. Of course, certain states the Panchayati Raj institutions are very well resourced, but the target was the Northern India Panchayati Raj institutions will do something about it, but something has not happened. The other point that he has mentioned is using community institutions like self-help group in mediation of programs. That has worked very well, in particularly the National Rural Livelihood Mission. Also, using the community resource persons as the frontline workers in many of these programs, whether it is the ASAs in NRHM or the community resource persons in NRLM, they have been a very, very, and they are all paid on a performance-based pay. They are not regular salaried workers. These innovation has worked pretty well in some of these programs, and that's something that we can possibly other programs can learn from. Leveraging technology is something that again has been emphasized by Amarjit in many programs, including in the much reviled and much criticized Manrega, where geotagging of assets have been fairly pretty, they have done geotagging of most assets. Geotagging of houses on the Awas Yojana has been very, very that has been a very interesting experiment intervention. Aadhaar-enabled PDS, and Bindaji is here. She was the architect of that. That has also brought in some very productive results. The third-party oversight in many of these programs, particularly in the Pradhan Mantri, it started with the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, bringing in high quality national quality monitors to inspect the quality of the roads on ground. This has been tried out in other schemes as well. Minister of Rural Development has also started this community, the program of the CRM. This is a body of academicians, outside experts who go and visit this program and give their feedback. So this third-party oversight is has been very successful. Of course, there are lot of things that we haven't done and we should be doing. The need for communitization is the biggest takeaway from this book, and that is cross-cutting. You read any chapter, communitization is at the core of what Amarjit has argued about. Finally, his vision, what kind of a vision for a developed India? He has said it in the book very pithily. It's India for all, something he has argued about. I think that's a very laudable, aspirational vision, and I don't think anybody can disagree with that. But, and he has also said that while growth is necessary, what is fundamentally more important is sustainability and inclusivity. And that if we don't build in that, I think, the India for all will not succeed. Other point I think found extremely, persuasive is about why are we only chasing ease of doing business ranking? Why don't we try and target that in the finite time horizon, India should be among the top 50 in the HRD ranking. If you tackle that, if you try and do a blueprint for that, many of the issues that we are talking about for a developed India will get addressed in that thing. I think there are some issues in the book, some conjectures, some hypotheses he has made in the book. They are contestable, no doubt, like any this thing, and any book should be. For example, his view that there is more demand for Manrega in a village because the quality of life is in villages have improved and people are staying back to work in the villages. Quite interesting proposition to really look at evidence and see whether that thing. Sir, you mentioned about the PSET system in Manrega. Actually, Manrega does advocate PSET system. It doesn't pay on the basis of time of the day. Overall, my take is an excellent contribution in the field of development practice. I commend it to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohapatra. Next, we have with us Sister Sujita, Sister of Notre Dame from Patna. Sister Sujita works at the grassroots, as Mr. Sinha had told us right in the beginning. She will be talking about women collectives and vulnerable social groups and their well-being, aspects that she has been working on for decades now. Sister Sujita, please.
Dear Amarjit ji, distinguished panelists, and dear friends, to be very honest, I have been so much enthused about this book, and so many things touch me deeply, so I had to discipline myself. So I have put some thoughts on the paper so that I don't run away with years of experiences. So I feel very honored and privileged to be among you today. The title itself is a clarion call for a paradigm shift in our approach to the whole idea of development and progress. Amarjit Ji clearly articulates the need to situate the poor, the marginalized, and very especially women at the center of development discourse. Because women empowerment is to be seen as a political device for lasting transformation that we are looking for. Of course, he could not have made me more happy than that, because it's a proven fact, and across the book I see the emphasis on this. I have witnessed Amarjit Ji's sensitivity and closeness to the poor, the downtrodden, and his belief in the power of women's participation. This sensitivity and openness to grassroots experiences during his years of involvement in the social sector, coupled with his brilliant mind and experiential inner wisdom, makes the book absolutely a compelling companion for all of us who care about this topic. Thank you Amarjit Ji. We congratulate you for your amazing ability to present such complex topic from the perspective of the poor with a deep sensitivity to women and with utmost clarity and credibility. We read many books, wonderful ideas. It doesn't get into the heart. You have touched our hearts. I am asked to speak a few words on women's collective and vulnerable social groups and their well-being. So what I will say, I'm not going to touch on the wonderful work women have accomplished. That's not. My one key point is putting people first. The human development, the person. So I cannot speak about the wonders I have seen once that personhood has been discovered by the poor, especially women. So my many years of experience of living and working among the Dalits and the Mahadalits, the Musahars, you know the Musahars. They are the rat eaters, they call them Musahars. In the remote villages of Bihar, and my experience of leading the Mahila Samakya program of the Bihar Education Project have given me deeper understanding of the extensive social exclusion and disadvantages faced by the people of the last mile. And it has taught me many invaluable lessons about the empowering process and building women's collectives for these programs. And that is why I find an echo of my heart in Amarjit Ji's book. Recently, the Global Hunger Index that was released this year, 2023, keeps India on the 111th in a list of 125 countries. Yes, the last mile must be our first priority if we are thinking of India for all. So it's a very timely book from that point of view. Friends, when I lived among the poorest of the poor, I came to realize that the real issues that confront the people, the poor, are issues related to the very basic necessities of life: food, shelter, nutrition, health, livelihood, and dignity, education. So these are the real issues. I often asked myself, how can the public policies and programs for social transformation for our vulnerable, voiceless people, especially women who have suffered centuries of marginalization and poverty, change their own as well as the society's perception of them and set their feet firmly on the path of dignity and selfhood. For me, this is foundational. Programs can fail, governments can change, but once this is discovered, they will go. They will find their way. So for me, the bottom line, the foundation is this. How can the people of the last mile become owners and leaders of development ventures at all levels? And I think the book makes this point very clear. I am convinced that people, especially women, who experience poverty and exclusion, carry deep within them the potential and motivation for personal and communal transformation and sustainable development. You don't have to look outside. It's within these people. And it will always be a collective effort. Otherwise, we have seen in the villages among women, one or two started a small program of selling something, and they made enough money but did not care. So it was very important the collectives become empowered. Hence the importance of women's collective. However, forming the disadvantaged women into cohesive, vibrant group collectives is a very uphill task that requires personal encounters with them, deep sensitivity, empathetic listening, respecting their dignity, their skills, their knowledge, understanding the dynamics of being on the last mile. That existence changes you. You have to understand that. And above all, to believe in their hidden potential to liberate themselves. Our programs are only a means. The power is within the people. This is what the collective is trying to bring about, really to discover that. So, dear friends, when women speak about well-being, they speak about material, social, physical, psychological, and spiritual dimension. I add spiritual, because there is a power to discovering the human soul within them, that power. In addition to the security and freedom of choice and action, yes, women's collectives provide the space for collective reflection, critical analysis, and engenders confidence and self-worth, so that women feel increasingly and progressively empowered to influence or to take decisions that affect their lives. This is what we are looking for when we talk about women's collective. This, in order to make this happen, we are challenged to turn the public policy upside down, and Amarjit Singh has got it right. That is a revolutionary shift, and thanks to the dedicated people like him, this process is already begun. And many examples are there. And we'll hear from Kirti, I think, one of the success stories. The last mile narrative gives ample evidence of the importance and impact of addressing this issue through women's collectives and the vulnerable social groups, leading to the realization of their God-given self-worth, dignity, and their human potential, and become respected, responsible, and valued citizens of the country. not only recipients of some programs of charitable works or government development programs, they become fully contributing human persons. Yes, we need to insert a vibrant, sensitive spirit, a soul, into the discipline of public policy by listening to the heartbeat of the people on the last mile. They will tell us what they need and how we can accompany them in reaching their dreams for a dignified life of equality and justice. Really, friends, I tell you, I went with a lot of knowledge and thinking, understanding. We are going to do this with women, that with women. In no time, I learned I need to keep quiet and listen to them. Wisdom. There is wisdom. There is power. So I learned more from the women's collective than I taught them. So this is extremely important because we believe they have the power. And I think that is a secret of all the development works. I'm so sure of that. So in my experience with Mahila Samakya, I have seen that women-led development programs for education, healthcare, livelihood have great potential for becoming transformative. Not only some little change happened, program finished, everything is back to square one. No, a transformation takes place when it is from within that, when it is supported by that inner conviction, I am a human person, I can do this. I am capable. So this strong conviction. So thank you. Thank you, Amarjit, for making such a strong, clear statement. A pro-poor, pro-women public welfare system so that the vulnerable on the peripheries of our society, especially women and girls, may become participants and contributors in the creation of a new India. When these last, the least and the lost ones can live their life to the full, we can truly say India is for all. Thank you for challenging all of us, challenging our whole nation to get involved in this journey of inclusive empowerment, sustained transformation that nobody can take away from our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Sujita. Well, I'm reminded of a beautiful poem by Rabindranath Tagore with a lovely message. Sky is filled with sun and stars, and that's why I have a place in this divinity. I'm now requesting Siddharth to mesmerize us with these beautiful lines.
This is a poem by Kavi Guru Rabindranath Tagore. Akash bhara surjo tara bishwa bhara pran tahari majhkhane আমি পেয়েছি মোর স্থান বিস্ময়ে তাই জাগে আমার গান আকাশ ভরা অসীম কালে হিল্লোলে জোয়ার ভাটায় ভুবন্দোলে অসীম কালের যে হিল্লোলে জোয়ার ভাটায় ভুবন্দোলে নারীতে মোর রক্তধারায় লেগেছে তার টান বিস্ময়ে তাই জাগে জাগে আমার গান আকাশ ভরা
Thank you. Now I would like to invite the very eminent Dr. K. Srinath Reddy, the health expert of the country, to talk on public health for all.
Good evening. It's been a privilege to have been associated with Mr. Sinha in several capacities, including in the high-level expert group on universal health coverage. And in that process, to have been beneficiary of his vision and wisdom, which spans the entire spectrum of development and provides a very unified understanding. And that's what is reflected so elegantly and eloquently in this book. Indeed, if we are really looking at health and often looking at it as something of an illness that strikes a person that requires care to be provided with efficiency, empathy, and equity, that is still a very limited understanding of health. The spectrum of health, of course, extends from health promotion and prevention to timely diagnosis, cost-effective treatment, rehabilitation, and palliation. But the whole public health dimension of health is often neglected and ignored in policy. While there are politically correct statements made often about the need for prevention and health promotion and of promoting primary care, often when policymakers respond to health crises, the attention is usually on tertiary care and occasionally on secondary care, and primary care gets neglected in the process. Mr. Sinha makes a very strong case for the health system really developing that grassroots connectivity and strength of primary care, and illustrates with clear examples from Kerala and Tamil Nadu as to how that prioritization has strengthened the entire health system. And what he calls a horizontal model is also a well-connected model across various levels of care. But without a strong primary health care, we cannot really have our goals of providing health for all ever succeed. Now, coming to Mr. Amarjit Sinha's main contentions, the various points that have been made in this book are: the health system needs greater investment of public financing. The returns of investment, in terms of that investment, take time. That requires system strengthening, that you require upfront investment in strengthening the health system if you expect that the resources allocated are going to be efficiently and fully utilized. However, there is often an impatience in asking for early results and dismissing investments as having been wasted if those results are not immediately visible. He gives a very clear-cut example of how the National Rural Health Mission was originally proposed for 10 years, was sanctioned for 7 years, but later on extended to 10 years, and of course now continues to be extended as the National Health Mission. And the fruits of that investment are so clearly visible and very well documented in Mr. Sinha's book on the marked reductions that have been achieved over the last 1 decade in infant mortality rate, under 5 mortality rate, and maternal mortality ratio. These would not have been possible if there were only short-time investments. And of course, the ASHA is a remarkable success story. And in terms of the ASHAs, the rise in institutional deliveries by themselves have been remarkably documented and applauded world over, and that is something that he brings about. Second thing, of course, he does call for investment in public financing and also in terms of more efficient public management systems. Kenneth Arrow, the Nobel laureate, had said, health is a clear example of market failure. Of course, there are many other examples of market failure, education, environment, and so many others. But in terms of health, again, Mr. Sinha makes the point that unless we have a strong public sector, we are unlikely to really achieve health for all. And that's, therefore, he says you cannot leave it entirely to the market forces. And he emphasizes that primary care is necessary for a gatekeeping role, and that a strong public sector is needed even to get the best out of the private sector, to regulate cost and quality. It does not negate the role of the private sector. Of course, in a mixed health system that is evolved by default rather than by intent, we recognize that we have to utilize all the resources that are available in the public sector, private sector, and the voluntary sector. But he says that this should be under a clearly defined framework where the public sector sets the terms, monitors the quality of care provided by the private sector, and ensures that what is promised as deliverable is actually delivered. And therefore, his own vision in terms of a health system where the public sector is in the pole position is that the public sector has to be more responsive, if I may paraphrase your recommendations. The public sector has to be more responsive, the private sector has to be more responsible, and the voluntary sector has to be more resourceful. And there he says that the NGOs have a definite role to play because they reflect the voices in the field, and they actually bring about the recognition of the ground level realities on a day-to-day basis. Now, coming to the question of whether it should be the Zilla Parishad that should be leading or whether it should be entirely the Panchayat which should be managing the resources, that could be debated. Certainly a decentralized decision making at the district level is very much necessary. Policy making, perhaps at the national level, planning at the state capital level, and fairly flexible planning, implementation at the district level. But unless the voices from the ground come from the village level communities, from the urban communities, and are actually voicing the lived reality of the day, we will not get the feedback and the correctives that are required, and that's the case that Mr. Sinha makes so very eloquently for that community connect. And he says that public-private partnerships are perhaps inevitable, necessary, and can be useful, provided they're carefully managed. Of course, he calls for gender empowerment as an absolutely critical ingredient of this. Again, while focusing on health, he does not neglect the very many determinants of health. And his own career as a civil servant administrator has taken him to many of those domains of human development, but his own sensitivity to the fact that health is determined by so many other influences and they need to be addressed in a manner that policies and programs in other sectors are sensitive to and aligned with public health objectives comes through very clearly in the book. So whether it's water, sanitation, nutrition, and of course now environment too. And he illustrates from the point of view of the dengue epidemic of 2014 in Delhi as to where public health failures came because of failures in water and sanitation. And of course, COVID also showed us that urban primary health care, which was neglected, had a price tag too. Now, in terms of the various recommendations that he makes in the book, let me call them the Sinha Sutras, the 8 of them there. That first is the market approach will fail if it is purely a market-oriented approach. And I suppose, Mr. Sinha, you would say that the ease of doing business must yield place to the business of easing lives. Second sutra is that fix the public system of healthcare. While we do want public sector to really have the stewardship, we recognize the weaknesses, and he points them out too, and asks for correctives. He calls for horizontal capacities for primary care and illustrates clearly how that worked in NRHM. Engage the private sector as needed, but dismisses the insurance models as not the sole solution, because they will not work if there's a weak regulatory framework. And therefore, again, he points out that over-dependence on insurance systems will not work. And there also he says sometimes the trust model may work better, and gives examples of that. There's a greater thrust on preventive and promotive health. He urges that we must prioritize medical, nursing, and paramedical education for building competent human resources for health. That is, a multi-layered, multi-skilled health workforce which is capable of delivering on the promises that we make for health for all. And in this, he wants for strengthening of regulations and increased capacity. He wants the public financing to rise at least to 2 to 3% of the GDP, but says that we must go by evidence that investments in public systems have a high payoff. He also then, in the next chapter, talks about how we must address the gaps and fill the gaps. That is, we must connect care to community from primary to tertiary, and tertiary care in a bidirectional manner. The house-to-house connect is needed, and points out very clearly that one of the reasons why the Pradhan Mantri Jana Arogya Yojana has not succeeded in fully delivering on its promise is because of the lack of connectivity with primary care and the community, and not having a household as the unit of attachment. And therefore, he also suggests that there should be a much more connected healthcare system. He calls for holistic care, emphasizes the importance of Ayush and other traditional methods of care. And he would like us to recognize and respond to the needs of the middle class, which most programs, initially at least, leave out of a universal healthcare system, because they start with the most vulnerable and the poor, but do not often recognize that people just above the poverty line are extremely vulnerable too, and will be pushed into poverty with catastrophic health expenditure, which may be sudden or very prolonged out-of-pocket expenditure for chronic health conditions. He suggests that India is in a very good position not only to learn from the examples of other countries, but also can offer examples of how best we can actually deliver care in a much more resource-efficient manner, because of multiple reasons of our own ability to produce generic drugs, our own efficiency in delivering care with less cost even in hospital level, but of course with a much stronger primary healthcare system. So a resource-optimizing universal health coverage is what India can model and demonstrate to the world. In chapter 14, as I said, he talks about making quality health for all a reality, and he suggests that we must address all the determinants of health with a strong community connect. And he states that community connect enables recognition of needs and aids efficient response to them, which is very clear. When we talk about multisectorality, it is often suggested that it happens only at the level of the top levels of the government, where secretaries to government or probably Niti Aayog or Prime Minister's office will coordinate that multisectorality. While the vision can be set there, operationally it fails, because at the lower level, even within the government departments, every bureaucrat is wedded to their own budget line and their own deliverables, and the lip service paid to multisectorality fades away when they are pursuing their own objectives without necessarily addressing how multisectorality can be achieved. While that vision is necessary at that level, the multisectorality actually should be inspired from the community level, because multisectorality is the lived reality of every person's life in the community, whether it is education or food or water, electricity, and health. Of course, it is the lived reality of everybody in the community, and that reality must reflect to the top and voice the demand for multisectoral synergies and coordination. And basically, he also calls for models like Kerala and Tamil Nadu to be adopted elsewhere and embed communitized programs within the Panchayat care system. So there are to conclude, there are 5 mantras that he recommends as the main approaches of the National Rural Health Mission, which are eminently transferable to other public policies. One is communitization, second is flexible financing, third is monitoring progress against standards, and fourth is improved management through capacity building, and fifth is innovations in human resource management. And he talks again about how ASHAs have been a sterling example of how some of these principles have been translated into accomplishment. May I say, Mr. Sinha, finally, that what you're addressing in terms of people-partnered public health and decentralized decision-making are indeed applicable to all public policies. And finally, referring back to the very evocative songs that have been played, we know that you are not destined to be Ekla Chalo Hai, Ekla Chalo Re Rahi. There will be many people who will walk with you, and we know आप कांटों पे चलने वाले राही हैं, पीछे हटने वाले राही नहीं हैं, हम सब आपके साथ हैं.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy. Going ahead, because it's my responsibility to take care of the time, I'm going to request our panelists to kindly keep your talks to just 5 minutes. I don't want to delay, the audience from having dinner and leave early, so that's why this request of please keeping to time of 5 minutes now on. With this request, I'm going to invite Mr. Vineet Nayyar, the chairman of Sampark Foundation, to talk on teacher development and learning outcomes in schools through frugal innovations. Mr. Nayyar, please.
So good evening. This is the example of what happens in the last mile. By the time your turn comes, it is 5 minutes. So I am very new to policy, and I don't know why Amarjit called me to speak here. I come from corporate sector, I come from management, and therefore what I see here on the board is Amarjit has, in management we talk about spotlight management. He has put spotlight on 2 words, which is what I'm going to talk about, the last mile and upside down. Before I do that, I want to recognize Amarjit's last mile. So Anita ji, if you will stand up, let's give her a big round of applause. She is his last mile, and Amarjit is a fantastic storyteller, so I'm going to tell you 2 stories. He's an advisor on Sampark Foundation board, and I have learned a lot from him and continue to learn on a daily basis. So first is the last mile. You've already heard why last mile is important, but let me tell you my story. My mother was a teacher, and she was working with the Sisters of Notre Dame for 30 years. I was flying private jets, doing very well with HCL, their vice chairman and CEO. And one day I went to my mother and said, look, we are 3 brothers, and he said, you should be very proud of this middle son. The other 2 brothers have done very little, but this son has done a lot. And she, being a teacher, she wrote something on a piece of paper, gave it to me. I was flying to New York that day. I opened the envelope, and there was only one word called enough written there. I landed in New York, called her up, and said, what does this mean? And she says, you are a slow learner, you will understand it on your way back. And I did. So the point I'm making is last mile, and that is the time I quit. Me and my wife started Sampark Foundation, which, as Amarjit said, is working in collaboration with the 8 state governments, touching lives of 1 crore children in 109,000 schools. My journey started in 2012 because of that word enough. Last mile, I think we do not have enough mothers saying enough to enough children so that they can go and work in the last mile. Policies are fine. Intentions are fine. But how many people, like people in this room, are moving out from air-conditioned private jets or air-conditioned cars or comfort of their homes and going and working where it really matters. And I think the role of the mothers in my life, role of teachers in my life, or Anupma's life, is very critical. And therefore, can we wake up the mothers of today? Can we wake up the fathers of today so that they shake the consciousness of our young people and saying, you need to do something for the country. The country is not what you read in the newspaper, but the country exists in the last mile, which Amarjit does such a fantastic job of putting a spotlight on that. The second word is upside down, and I'm going to stick to the 5 minutes and therefore talk about the story on upside down. There was a boy who wanted to learn judo. He went from one coach to another to teach him judo. Every coach said, I can't teach you judo because he had only one arm. And he was very frustrated, but he kept trying. And ultimately, he met one coach and he says, okay, I will teach you judo. So that coach taught him judo. And he participated in a tournament after 6 months, won the first round, second round, semi-final, and then he had the trophy in his left arm. Everybody rushed to the coach and said, what happened? How did you? We all refused that we will not teach him. You not only taught him, but he won the trophy. So the coach said something very important. The concept of upside down is you're all looking at what he doesn't have. I looked at what he has. He has only one arm. If there is one aggressive move in judo, the counter to that is to catch hold of the right arm of your opponent and spin him around. My boy doesn't have the right arm. So I saw that he has only one arm, and I saw the opportunity. So when Amarjit talks about upside down, I know the book covers a lot of issues which our country faces, but it's a large country, so obviously issues are there. But look at the opportunities which exist. If this country did not have so many problems, then how would we have an opportunity to be able to contribute back? How would I have an opportunity, or Anupma have an opportunity of contributing back? When a diamond cutter looks at rough diamond, he gets excited. When a potter looks at rough clay, he gets excited. All of us should look at this book and look at the challenges of this book and understand that we have to get excited about the last mile, and we can only make a difference if we turn it upside down. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nair. Going ahead, we have with us Ms. Kirti, who has come all the way from Jharkhand. She is in the board of directors for Balini Milk Producer Company of Bundelkhand. Ms. Kirti, आपसे आग्रह है कि आप आइए और हमें बताइए कि आप किस तरह से आप और आपकी महिलाएं काम कर रही हैं.
नमस्कार, मेरा नाम कीर्ति है। मैं बलनी मिल्क प्रोड्यूसर कंपनी की बोर्ड डायरेक्टर हूँ। मैं वीरांगनाओं की धरती से आई हूँ। बुंदेलखंड से बलनी मिल्क प्रोड्यूसर कंपनी की ओर से यहाँ उपस्थित आज के गरिमामय पुस्तक के लेखक श्री अमरजीत सिंह जी को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देती हूँ और सभी सभासद और महान अतिथियों को धन्यवाद देती हूँ कि मुझे यहाँ तक आने का सौभाग्य प्राप्त किया और इसमें हिस्सेदारी का सौभाग्य प्राप्त किया। बलनी सन 2019 में 7 दिसंबर को इसका उद्घाटन हुआ था, जिससे पहले तो क्या था कि दूध का कोई सही रेट नहीं मिलता था और दूध का कोई मतलब हम लोग क्या करते थे कि पशुपालन में रुचि नहीं रखते थे। अपने एक पशु पाल लिया, घर का खर्च मतलब काम चल रहा है, काफ़ी है। लेकिन जब बलनी आई तो पशुपालन में रुचि हो गई और इसको एक व्यवसाय के रूप में पशुपालन करने लगे। पहले क्या था कि हम लोगों के खातों में 1 रुपया भी नहीं रहता था, लेकिन जब से बलनी आई तो जनधन खातों में इतना पैसा है कि बैंक वाले भी कहते हैं अरे भाई अपना खाता बड़ा कराइए। बलनी आज 7 जिलों में काम कर रही है। जिसमें झांसी, जालौन, हमीरपुर, बांदा, चित्रकूट, ललितपुर एवं महोबा। बल्नी अब तक 1061 गांवों में काम कर रही है। बल्नी के साथ अब तक 66,000 किसान महिलाएं जुड़ चुकी हैं। बल्नी का अभी दूध संकलन करीब 2,50,000 लीटर प्रतिदिन है। महीने में 3 बार महिलाओं के खातों में भुगतान किया जाता है बिना बिचौलिए के, सीधा डायरेक्ट महिलाओं के खातों में जाता है। बल्नी ने यह 7 करोड़ का है। माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी के कर कमलों द्वारा इसका उद्घाटन हुआ था, जब किसानों ने इस पर विश्वास किया। पहले तो ऐसा लग रहा था कि शायद कंपनी चले या ना चले या चली जाए। जब उनके द्वारा इसका उद्घाटन हुआ तो किसानों को विश्वास हुआ। यहाँ तक कि कोरोना काल में भी बहुत सी संस्थाएं बंद हो गई थी, लेकिन बल्नी ने हमेशा किसान महिलाओं का साथ दिया और हमेशा कारोबार किया, जिससे कि उनके घर में रोटी की सुविधा होती रही। मैं आजीविका मिशन राजकीय आजीविका मिशन NDDB डेयरी सर्विस को बहुत धन्यवाद देती हूँ कि मैं घूंघट से निकल के यहाँ इस मंच तक आई हूँ। नहीं तो अभी गांव में इतनी छूट नहीं है, हम लोग अभी भी पर्दे में रहते हैं। मैंने कुछ 2 शब्द लिखे आप सबके लिए। मुस्कान आपकी हमारे लिए वरदान है, आपका मार्गदर्शन हमारे लिए सम्मान है। आपने हमें बुलाया, रब हम पर मेहरबान है, बड़े नसीब वाले हैं हम जो आपके मेहमान हैं। लास्ट में अपनी संस्था का नारा देना चाहती हूँ, हमाओ बल और हमारी बल्नी, हमारा बल और हमारी बल्नी। इसी के साथ अपनी वाणी को विराम देती हूँ।
बहुत बढ़िया कीर्ति जी, क्या बात है। आपका बहुत धन्यवाद कि आप यहाँ पे आए और अपने इतने अच्छे शब्दों से हम सबको अनुग्रहित किया। Going ahead, I would now request Mr. Saroj Mohapatra, the Executive Director of Pradhan, to talk on women collectives and sustainable livelihood. Mr. Mohapatra.
Many congratulations, Mr. Amarjit Sinha, for having this book. I think this is a very good learning document actually, and which captures the. दीदी आपने बहुत अच्छा बोले हैं, उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. So let me share some of the learning from this book actually. Like these books talk about the community-led development and mainly around the women collectives. So let me share what are the strengths internal to the community, what is mentioned in the book. Like the community collectives, mainly promoted by the NRLM, the National Rural Livelihood Mission, they have the human resources actually. So they have the traditional skill, they have the traditional knowledge, and they have the aspirations actually. And apart from this, they have the natural resources like land resource, water resource, livestock, and forest resource. So all this combines the human resources and the natural resource base. And apart from that, there are agencies which are external to the communities, like government, which provides the funding support, basic services, and the policy guidelines, markets, banks, resource agencies, research agencies, CSOs, mainly the providing the handholding support and the technical support, political parties, medias, and the cooperatives and the producer companies. So these are the agencies which are external to the community, and these are very beautifully articulated in this book actually. And about the learning, those sticking to the time, I will share about the learning from this book. like this book talks about the organized community is very much critical because you see this 90 million women have been organized, more than 90 million have been organized into self-help groups program under this NRLM, National Rural Livelihood Mission. So this program talks about the SHGs, the village organizations, cluster level federations, where the women are getting the mutual help, financial intermediation, access to credit, and obviously the livelihood promotion. So this organized community is very critical, and at the same time this CBO and Panchayat collaboration is very much the need of the hour actually. So how to trigger this community-led change process based on people's need, people's aspirations, the opportunities, and at the same time the resources which they are having. I think this book very well captures the, in the narrative part, it's very well captured actually. So the learning is like, we need to have the community-led processes, and the locus of initiative has to be the community collectives, the women collectives. Because you see the livelihood is not about the income actually, it's about the comprehensive, it's more about the income plus actually. So it talks about the nutrition, it talks about the ecology, it talks about the centrality of women and their collectives, it talks about the sense of agency of the women collectives. Also it talks about the local and micro level solutions as very important, but at the same time looking at the scale and complexities of the problem, one need to see it as a bigger framework actually. And at the same time, the context-specific interventions are very much required, like the program for ultra-poor communities. So the inclusion has to be the focus there. So one size fit for all to need-based approach is the need of the hour, and this book talks about the same in many of the chapters. Similarly, it also talks about the convergence part, like the flagship program like MGNREGS and NRLM, where the Panchayat and the CBOs are playing a very critical role. So it talks about the convergence part, which is very much required actually, because both these programs are having the similar objectives. So comprehensive interventions around the resource management, the intensification of livelihoods, the diversification of livelihoods, and also in the income enhancement, keeping the ecological aspect into considerations, also the regenerative farming practices, so that the transformation in the quality of rural lives can be achieved. So I think this book talks about that actually. And at the same time it talks about the whole gamut of these forward and backward linkages in a very sustainable manner, because in most of the backward areas like South Chhattisgarh or South Odisha, these linkages do not exist actually. So building people like in terms of Ajivika Krishi Mitra or the Pasu Sakhi is the need of the hour, and this book highlights the why we need to build people from the community, so that the capacity building, creation of appropriate support structure and the infrastructural support, at the same time the handholding support at the grassroots level can be achieved. And at last it talks about the how to orchestrate the convergence between various grassroots action, the grassroots players like the community-based organizations in terms of SHGs and village organizations, the cluster level federations, government agencies, the research institutions, technical agencies, the civil society organizations, and private donors, at the same time the markets. So how to orchestrate this convergence between various stakeholders, I think this book highlights in a very greater depth actually, and I'm very sure this would be a very good learning document for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahapatra. Before we go ahead to the next speaker, I'm going to request Siddharth once again to play for us Blowing in the Wind by Bob Dylan.
So Bob said, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. That's what he said. must a man walk down before you can call him a man? And how many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, and how many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? Yes, and how many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, and how many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? Yes, and how many ears must one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, and how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. Going ahead, we have Dr. Mahesh Sharma, the Chancellor of the Mahatma Gandhi Central University, Champaran, to talk about technology and decentralized action for people-centric development. Dr. Sharma.
धन्यवाद. मैं थकान अधिक देख रहा हूँ ऑडियंस में. कुछ लोग मोबाइल देख रहे हैं. कुर्सियाँ पहले कम पड़ रही थी, अब काफ़ी खाली हो गई हैं. मेरी उपस्थिति मेरे पुराने मित्र अमरजीत सिन्हा को बधाई देने के लिए है. एक बहुत अच्छी किताब आई है और एक अच्छी डिबेट शुरू हुई है. मेरा एक ही कहना है कि मैं सब्जेक्ट पर बोलने के लिए कोई और मौका मुझे ढूंढना पड़ेगा. 2-4 मिनट की बात नहीं होती है. मैं केवल इतना रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा ISB के लोगों से, भारतीय इंस्टीट्यूट के लोगों से, ये विषय बड़ा है, गंभीर है, इसको आगे बढ़ाने की ज़रूरत है. कैसे कैसे बढ़ाया जाए उसके अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ ढूंढना पड़ेगा. आप कम्युनिटी लेड डेवलपमेंट की बात कर रहे हैं. हमारे जैसे लोग तो कम्युनिटी के बीच में ही काम करते रहे. मैं एमटेक छोड़कर भी चला गया था, IIT कैंपस भी छोड़ के चला गया था. विनोबा ने कहा पढ़ना तो गांव में जाओ, और मैं ईमानदारी से कह सकता हूं कि मैंने जितना BHU IIT में सीखा उससे ज़्यादा गांव में रह के सीखा। मैं इमोशनल टर्म्स में नहीं कह रहा हूँ, इवन हार्ड टेक्नोलॉजी में भी, मेटलर्जी में, आयरन स्टील में मैंने जो असुर बिरजिया लोगों से सीखा वो अपने BHU के डिपार्टमेंट में नहीं सीखा था। वहाँ बहुत कुछ सीखने का मौका है, करने का मौका भी है, करना चाहिए। इस पूरी चर्चा को आगे बढ़ाना चाहिए, इतनी मेरी रिक्वेस्ट है। अमरजीत सिन्हा को फिर एक बार बहुत बहुत बधाई, शुभकामनाएं।
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma. As Dr. Sharma suggested that this is a theme that needs importance, I would like to announce at this stage that the Bharati Institute of Public Policy at the Indian School of Business has decided that the annual conference that we host, which is titled as Public Policy Dialogues, will be held in the month of January from the 2nd to the 5th of January, and the theme of the conference is human development. So we invite all of you to be a part of that conference at Hyderabad, and we look forward to your presence at that event too. Going ahead, we have Dr. Ritu Priya from Jawaharlal Nehru University, who is a public health expert, to talk about community connect and human well-being.
थैंक यू अमरजीत जी, बहुत धन्यवाद, आपने फिर एक मौका दिया. One opportunity I had when the NRHM was just being rolled out, and I moved out of the university and went to the National Health Systems Resource Center, which had been started as a technical body under the aegis of and the secretariat of which Amarjit ji was not only a part but was part of designing the NRHM framework, as we learn very eloquently in the book itself as well. And therefore that gave me an opportunity to really be in an in-between house between a university and the agency of the state, and with all its power of designing and rolling out, and therefore gave an opportunity to be sort of participant observer in an implementation process. Therefore I find extremely valuable this book, which Amarjit ji brings together all his experience of a bureaucrat who has not been, as many of us at least used to think of bureaucrats as those who look at welfare only as a dole to be passed on to beneficiaries, but as somebody who looks at basic welfare as basic right of each individual to be fulfilled as a responsibility of the state, as a caring state, and thereby moves the rights approach also into a participatory mode. And that's, I think, what The Last Mile really expresses so well, and his whole journey throughout his career in the various spheres where he has worked. I wouldn't like to repeat what the book already says, because I think my senior colleague, Dr. Srinath Reddy, has already laid out what in health is so detailed in the book, and what Sister Sujita has laid out about what her whole experience and learning from the Musahar community and with the women and so on. My role has been really as an observer and a researcher. Therefore, I don't have the heroic tales that we have heard about from the women and the groups themselves. I'm as much of a, Amarjit ji very humbly in the beginning said he was only putting down what he had learnt. Mine is an even smaller role of observing it and analyzing it and leaving it there maybe, or having people like him take it on somewhat into the work that the state system does, and doing it to the point where we are seeing the last mile become so much of a central issue in policy today. So therefore, great thanks for the work and for others like him who engage in this kind of work. Observing through the position I was in those 2 years, one could see that in his own work, he was a master of implementation of the new public management which was coming up in the 90s, which expressed many of the things that the NRHM had. And I'm talking of the NRHM, but it's reflected in many of the other dimensions that are in the book. What one does learn about from the book really is that health seems to be one sphere which has not done as well as the others. And that's, that it's put out in the book also as the limitations of what was possible to do with the NRHM. What it does, many people have analyzed it to say that because we got 1/3 of the funds for NRHM, therefore the outcomes were also about 1/3 of what was envisaged and planned. I've been subsequently looking at these studies, my own experience working with Dalit construction workers or manual workers in different contexts, and trying to understand their perceptions of health and well-being. Sometimes wonder whether even what the NRHM framework of implementation envisaged, and all the various bodies at various layers, which were for communitization and for transparency, for collecting data and figuring out what are the gaps and doing mid-course correction, all of which was very inspiring in the process of implementation of a mission mode as the NRHM was. The situation on the ground seems to be not only about funding, and I'm talking specifically about healthcare because that seems to be a lacuna in what we have been able to achieve. There is a larger health crisis which is global, a healthcare crisis, which is not just Indian, and therefore I wouldn't put it at NRHM's failure. It's a question of how do we now need to build on this last mile understanding and do what Sujita and other friends have said about trying to understand what those people in the last mile are actually thinking and aspiring. What is their worldview which we bring into the design? Not only in the implementation level. The last mile is not only for implementation. It is also there to help us understand how to conceptualize and design. And that's where one would see probably in healthcare, there is the least that we see of indigenous ideas, of people's own thinking on what they are doing. I'm sure if we ask around this room, all of us do things at home which are not what the doctor told us. The things that we do for our own health because we all understand something about our own health, and we use home remedies, we use all kinds of dietary and exercise, so on and so forth. How do we draw, this is the understanding that we as urban middle class, educated, etc. do, but everybody across the board, and therefore I'm extremely glad that we had the sentence in the book which says that the work on human development has been done accepting that rationality of each human being is a part of the belief of doing human development. In that frame, if I look back at the kind of understanding one gets from various studies, work that I did with construction workers, they came up with saying that their well-being had certainly improved, and this was Dalit construction workers. Their idea of what had happened was, izzat aur azadi badh gayi hai, post-independence, and that is entirely credit to the role of the state. The ethics of equality is what they see as their source of well-being of the times, and that's the ethics of the times as they put it. What they said was the unethics of the times was commercialization of all dimensions of life, including the kind of break it meant to community cohesion, etc. Why I'm just going into this bit of detail is because I think one would now want to see, having heard all what is in the book, how it can be built upon in the coming times, where we have a global health crisis on, where we have the climate crisis and so on, and therefore sustainable development is something we're all looking at. How do we reconceptualize systems which need to be implemented with the last mile? How do we conceptualize that? And I'm just taking one example to say so. The current slogan, which is universal health coverage, is now being recognized that it can't, which was secondary and tertiary care only, as Srinathji told us, has now included primary health care because it cannot do without that. That's where the last mile seems to be seen to work. But the last mile is not only at the primary level. We need the last mile at the secondary level and at the tertiary hospital. When anybody goes to a hospital as a patient, you need more than just being seen as an illness that the doctor is going to treat. We all experience the kind of feeling almost of not being heard or indignity that comes. How do we factor that into our improving quality of care and in public systems? Because that is where we expect improvements to happen, as Srinathji again pointed out. That's what would provide the standards for the private sector to take on. the non-commercialization, and the quality of care that requires human development and empowerment of the patient are different ideas which now need to be brought on. In designing, we talk today in sustainability language of co-production of knowledge. How are people themselves handling the problem in their context? From there, we might probably draw out many more learnings than we would if we asked the doctors and asked doctors internationally. One experience that one got from a study that the National Health Systems Resource Center conducted across 18 states on Ayush and local health traditions. The local health tradition dimension, which was entered in the framework of implementation of NRHM, was not taken on by any state, which was cultivation of herbs, which was getting folk healers and so on in. These are examples which show that we are not really designing and conceptualizing with the last mile. How do we start doing that? By building on this book. I think this book provides an excellent base of what 20th century development has reached its culmination, and much of it has reached the last mile with the levels of education and so on that we have achieved. How do we take that forward in an area which is seen as technical and technological like healthcare? Internationally, that's a crisis, and I'll leave the point there, that one would really invoke the bureaucrats now who are in charge and taking on, how do they take the work of this last mile forward into conceptualizing designs and systems? Thank you, Amarjit ji, for the book which provides this possibility.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ritu. Next, we have with us Ms. Sanchita Mitra, the National Head of Seva Bharat, who's going to talk about women-led enterprises for development and transformation.
Amarjit Bhai, eminent panelists, and enthusiastics and slightly dipping enthusiastic friends. I would not take a long time, but I would really like to thank Amarjit ji to write this book, and it is very rare that in a bureaucrat you have such a lens. And what you have captured is something that we have been working in grassroots and finding that what you mentioned is the gap between the intent and the impact. In fact, I was actually going to meet the secretary of a department, and the issue was this which you have articulated. So this book actually highlights many of the issues which actually get stuck at the last mile. And even with the intent where the government is rolling out schemes, and but does it really reach the last mile? And there are a lot of challenges at the last mile, and from Seva's model, actually the last mile are the women who are not exactly beneficiaries, which we call, but also they are part of the movement, who collectively have a voice, from whom you need to listen, and you have to absorb their issues and make policies accordingly. So if the policies are heard from them, their issues, then they're implemented. But within that, if our women also have a voice in decision making, making policies, implementing at every stage, then I think that gets implemented. So within the women's collective, as you know, in Seva's model, it is, and we followed the Gandhian principle that coming together, having collectives out of which cooperative movement you are aware of, or producer companies later, it gives a kind of a power to the women, and it gives an income enhancement. So in the Seva's model, the governance structure is actually represented by the women, who are actually taught many ways how to run a business, how to manage a business. Now here I would say, where you have touched upon, Amarjit ji, that at one point I think more than subsidies you need more resources. And that is a big struggle point for us. Most of these social enterprises or collectives are situated in urban areas or not so comfortable areas. And at one point, you really need professional help. Because our compliance systems are also becoming very tough, very tough. You may know how to do farming, but you do not know what is GST, how to file income tax return. So this is mind-blowing, and it's very difficult to expect this from our women. But how do we get more and more professional resources to the places where they are really needed? So if you talk about the education system is also churning out people who are becoming more competitive, who need a higher salary package. We are also facing this problem about the designation, about the pay package. So these are all words that we really feel very puzzled. Yet we need these people. So now again coming back to Seva's model, we really recognized that women's collective can come to a certain stage, but to scale you definitely need an infusion of capital, you need an infusion of resources, you need to do branding, you need to have a good market, you need to have technology. So we thought that for each enterprise it may not be possible, so we formed a women's enterprise support system which we called WES, where you have a set of professionals who probably sometimes go to these places and give very specialized help to them. So this has been working, and because at one point they need access to finance, at one point they need branding, at one point marketing. So the specialized people give that kind of help. So I'll just come back again when you were talking. Actually, your book is talks a lot about SHGs, and I would really say the SHG movement has become a turning point in Indian history for our women. And here I would also like to bring that the microfinance concept was actually conceived by Ila Ben in early 1970s, and she was one of the first who thought poor women who are working women are credit worthy. So, and they do not have collaterals. And the guarantee is their peer groups who give guarantee. So that is how Seva Bank was formed, and it is running, and it is a successful model. It has expanded. We have replicated this model in the form of cooperatives in other places where the shareholders are women, the governance structure, the products are formed according to the women. But to access any kind of banking loan, I think till 2 lakhs or 3 lakhs, it is possible because of the SHG movement. Beyond that, it really gets difficult because the bankers do not till now think that the women are credit worthy. In fact, the women also do not articulate themselves well. The application processes are very cumbersome. They feel very intimidated by going to a bank, which are largely very formal by men. So here I think if you can refer to a study which Microsafe Consulting has done with Seva called Women Need Credit, and in fact in Niti Aayog we launched that study. Here we talk about all women do not need credit. So out of this, there are certain women who are credit willing, and not all credit willing are credit ready. So with readiness, we mean you have a business plan, you have full documents, you have other things which can make you ready. So from credit averse to making them willing to ready, I think that's the process. And that is where we have recognized the function of a bridge institutions, which can be a NGO, which can be Jivika. So these are institutions embedded in the community who know the people, who can give not only financial services but also finance plus services. So that can be a person who can make the documents, or can help in talking to the manager, can give some kind of assurance that I know this person because you have also mentioned that in the SAG, the loans are not traceable. It probably after some years, when you digitalize them, so the credit history is not there. So with borrowing so much from the SSG and no credit history, the banks are also very wary of giving this. So here, I would say that a recognition of a bridge institution would be good, who are very local people, local institutions, who can handhold as well as give some assurance to the banking or the financial institutions. I will end, and I congratulate you because I felt I could resonate. Sorry that I could read only a few chapters, but I was thinking probably it's my mind that's been written, and for a person like you, we normally in Seva, we say the heart is in the right place, and I'm sure our doctor panelists would agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have with us Ms. Vrinda Swaroop, the former Secretary, Government of India, who's going to talk on building public systems for outcomes in social development. Swaroop.
Good evening, everyone. And the last but one speaker comes on, I think I have to keep it very short and very crisp. Let me at the outset congratulate Amarjit for what is, I think, a Bible for anybody who is going to work on policy or is curious about policy, or whether in the government or outside the government. This is textbook stuff which is very worthy of praise. I'll keep it short. I think what struck me in Amarjit's book, and I'm talking more from the point of public systems. One is, I think he brings out very clearly the whole complexity of social policy. Government makes policies and policies, but when you come to social development policies, it's a different ball game and a very complex ball game. And I think he brings out that, and many of the speakers before me have brought that out clearly in all the dimensions and complexity. But I think he also brings out that the biggest game changer in the social sector is government, and will probably remain so because it has the largest outreach. And therefore, he sort of brings it to a sort of focus by saying what you build as public systems, what you build as public institutions, is where the heart of whether you succeed or you don't succeed will lie. And he makes a very impassioned defense that to quote him, I think he says, public social policy requires, I think I've forgotten it, but anyway, he makes a very impassioned plea that credible public systems is what you need to be able to execute change and work on this. So when he comes down to public systems, I think there's a lot in this book which people will find which is relevant for design. And there's a lot which has already come onto the table by our distinguished panelists who've said what is so vital in design. Largely, of course, it's the people-centric and women as very major participants and very important drivers of change, which I think comes out very sharply. The other he talks about is the governance. And in governance, again, I think many speakers have said what is Amarjit's punchline, which is to look at decentralization, devolution, empowerment at the grassroots. And if you want to sustain it, that's even more important. And the last but not the least in that framework that he lays down, and which is worthy of considerable attention in its own, is the human resource development of that aspect. Because if you don't build the right human resource to manage your institutions, you're going to get stuck somewhere. And he says that in many ways. And when he talks of human resource development, one sentence which those of us who have read the book, and many of you who will find it repeated chapter to chapter. And I quote him, he says, "We need more managers, not magistrates." So he's signaling a shift that government servants or partners who work on social change, on social programs, on social attitudinal changes, need to work more as proactive catalysts, change agents, and have to break. And he says you have to shake this inertia which imbues many of the government systems, and move away from routine, move away from bureaucratization to something which is responsive, to something that works with the people in mind who are the real participants in this. So I think that's one of his strongest recommendations on the human resource, which is, he also makes a strong plea that it's the partnership with non-governmental actors, whether in design, whether in implementation, whether even in analysis and feedback, is very central. And I think many members have said this on the stage, that this is probably one of the key things which will make the change more embedded, the change more targeted, and probably blessed better with a lot of grassroots insights. I think what he's also said, so the last mile is central to all these themes. But I think the part about standing everything on its head and upside down, so I was delighted when I read, and since I've remained associated with education more than anything else, I think I was delighted when I read that he says, teachers they're very important. They're the ones who make the school system work or not work. But he says, even they have to be assessed. Even they have to be, not only their competencies have to be built up, but there has to be assessment. And you must link, is a very strong comment, that if they are to move forward with promotions and increments, you must also assess whether they are worth it. And so that's some of the things which I call upside down, because our systems don't allow for all this. And but I think he's saying perform, and show the dividends. Anyway, so it's a controversial one, but it's there. And finally, I think we'll close by two very important issues which he doesn't say so explicitly, but it's imbued in his book. And one, he says, social sector changes or social sector interventions need the long haul. You cannot have short term, and I think this point was brought out by one of the members also, that this is something with which you have to stay the course for a long, long time. And the second point which comes out, and he calls it evidence-based, and I say it is probably even more, you have to constantly do an outcome monitoring, even if it's an interim or a process monitoring, to be able to see that change is coming about. So I think he brings all this into what is a great book for social activists, social policy watchers or policy makers. And I'll conclude by congratulating him for an excellent outcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Swaroop. Last but not the least, we have our very own Professor Ashwini Chhatre, the Executive Director of the Bharati Institute of Public Policy, to talk about our initiatives on livelihoods and our perspective on human development.
Well, I will not talk about that. I'm acutely aware of my position between you and your dinner. But your presence here allows me to license myself to use the full quota of my 5 minutes. I would like to talk about what I learned from the book and how it has allowed me to clarify my own thinking and possibly do better in the future. A starting point for me, for now almost 3 decades, is a conflict between my commitment to community as an important and potent force for transformation in society, and an even older question around community being the home of hegemony and oppression. And we have all strived to escape that community that holds us back, that prevents us from achieving our potential. And this contradiction, I feel I'm able to resolve after having read this book. And I mean, there is a very august history and legacy to this. Elinor Ostrom was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2009 for her work demonstrating that communities are a viable alternative to states and markets, especially when it comes to management and conservation of natural resources like water and forests and pastures and so on. More recently, even Raghuram Rajan has waded in, coming down firmly in favor of community. But again, it's more like a tournament between is state better, is community better, is market better, and so on. What this book allowed me to clarify is that it is not this versus that. It is how do you weave together a system where the role of the state is in synergy with the role of the community. And the book does it with examples that are very easy to relate, at least for me, working in specific spheres. I don't work on health, I don't work on education, I work on livelihoods, and specifically focusing on rural, natural resource-based livelihoods, working on land, water, forests, pastures, and so on. These examples are extremely useful in clarifying my own thinking. And at the base, it is important for me as an intellectual, as a professor, as an educationist, to be able to see that intellectual clarity in order to be able to translate it into action and then be able to talk to policymakers about what to do or what not to do. I have not read many such books that allow me to clarify my own thinking at the time when I read it. So the timing is perfect because I was more confused than I thought I was, and I am more clear than I would have been if I had not read this book. The second is just as a professor, as a teacher, the beauty of the book as teaching material. And as one of the speakers already pointed out, each of the chapters is standalone and has lessons that are useful in the classroom. To give you an example, the 2014 dengue outbreak in Delhi is all of about 4 pages, no more than 5. It is so concise and so clear that it is very easy for anyone to read. It is very easy for a teacher to use it in the classroom, to be assured that students will actually read it instead of a 25-page document that a teacher will be assured that the students will not read. And there are many such examples in the book. And this is the kind of experiential knowledge that we need to bring into the classroom, which is not yet available. And we hope through this book series to make a start with this book and more books to follow. The last point that I want to finish with is beyond the intellectual clarity that we need a system where the state is in synergy with communities and markets, regulated markets, beyond availability of experiential knowledge that can be used in the classroom, is the simple message and lesson about the experience, the lived experience of communities. And what I learned, what I did not read in the book, but what it reminded me of, to relate a small story. I work on climate change, and I work with communities whose lived experience of climate change is very different from what climate scientists write about, discuss, and present to policymakers. In this story, I was talking to apple growers in Himachal Pradesh, and they're in a place where apples used to be the main livelihood and are no longer commercially viable. Can be grown, but they are not big enough for or easy targets for pests. And their lived experience of climate change was encapsulated in one comment, is that this one middle-aged, my own age person who was lamenting the fact that apples are no longer viable, is that when I was small, if there was a bucket with some water left outside at night, overnight, in the morning during winters, it would be frozen. Now it is still water. Now that kind of lived experience of climate change, of global warming and local warming that actually affects livelihoods, we still cannot incorporate into our climate science and in our climate policy. Now that is the kind of community connect that needs to happen before our climate policy can actually relate to and respond to the lived experience and the needs of our rural communities. And this connect is something that we all should strive for, and I am committed to finding this connect in ways that allows the lived experience to be reflected in the actions and the investments that we make in all the spheres, at least in which that I am involved. With that, I will thank you very much, and I urge you to read this book for similar insights in whatever sphere that you are interested in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Chhatre. Before we go to the vote of thanks, we have Siddharth with us, and I'm going to request him for another song, which is a motivational song, Yun Hi Chala Chal Rahi.
चला चल रही यूं ही चला चल रही नी हसीन है ये दुनिया फूल सारे झमेले देख फूलों के मेल बड़ी रंगीन है ये दुनिया यूं ही चला चल रही यूं ही चला चल रही कितनी हसीन दुनिया फूल सारे झमेले देख फूलों के मेले बड़ी रंगीन है ये दुनिया ये रास्ता कह रहा है अब मुझसे मिलने को है कोई कहीं कब मुझसे ये रास्ता है कह रहा अब मुझसे मिलने को है कोई कहीं अब मुझसे यूं ही चला चल रही यूं ही चला चल रही जीवन गाड़ी है समय भैया आंसू की नदियां भी है खुशियों की बगिया भी है रास्ता सब तेरा तक भैया तुम दान रम तुम दान रम तुम दान तुम दान रम तुम दान रम तुम दान भैया तुम दानना तुम दानना रम तुम दानना तुम दानना रम तुम दानना कर तुम दानना भैया यूं ही चला चल रही कितनी हसीन है ये दुनिया फूल सारे झमेले देख फूलों के मेले बड़ी रंगीन है ये दुनिया तुम तारना तुम तारना तुम तारना तुम तारना तुम तारना तुम तारना दुनिया तुम तारना तुम तारना तुम तारना बड़ी हसीन है दुनिया.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, for the diversity of songs that we've heard from you today. Thank you once again. As we close today's amazing event, I would now request Mr. Amarjeet Sinha to kindly come up here on the dais for a vote of thanks.
Dear friends, after hearing all of them, you would agree that what I had said in the beginning is what the real truth is. If you have such distinguished minds to teach you, a book gets written. I thank each one of them for the absolutely outstanding interventions that he made. That's what my learning has been. There are a number of them sitting in front of me who have been role models, mentors, guides at various levels, various stages of life. Friends, though personal, I will be failing in my duty if I were not to mention it. This book almost got dropped because it so happened that I was a little unwell for a few months, December, January, February, March. If it was not for my dear wife, who nursed me back to good health again and the good wishes of everybody here. It's been wonderful working on it. Thanks for your patience. Join us for dinner. Thank you very much for having taken the time out to be here with us today.
Thank you so much. I request everyone to please join us for dinner downstairs. It's outside? Oh, it's outside on the back. Yeah.